The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This great story broke over the weekend. I find this story endlessly fascinating, and it relates to race. And if you've been paying attention to the news over the weekend, you probably know what story this is. This is the story of 37-year-old Rachel Dolezal, one of the most recognizable civil rights activists in Spokane, Washington, adjunct professor at Eastern Washington University, freelance columnist, the leader of Spokane's local NAACP chapter. Rachel Dolezal has built an identity around being an African-American woman. She's been identifying as Black for years, but according to her mom, she is Czech, Swedish, and German with some Native American heritage. She is not Black. This is a white family. Pictures of both of her parents appear as though both of the parents clearly are white people, and she has been both aggressive and proactive in purporting a seemingly false Black identity. And she was asked by KXLY reporter Jeff Humphrey whether she's Black, and she seemed confused. She didn't answer, ultimately walking away. This is not the type of reaction that inspires confidence. Let's take a listen.
As a Black Studies professor, I know what these images mean.
Are you African American?
I don't understand the question of, I did tell you that, yes, that's my dad. And he was unable to come in January.
Are your parents, are they white?
Okay, and then she walks away. Now, Lewis, let's do a thought experiment here. Are there any questions, if I asked you any question about your background, what would be sort of the three possible answers that you might give? If I say, Lewis, are you part Inuit?
Okay, I would say no.
Okay, but what else might you say? Like, if you were Inuit, what would you say? What would you say?
If I were Inuit, I would say, okay, I am a certain percentage Inuit.
And then if you didn't know, what would you say?
I guess I would say I'm not sure about. That would probably mean I don't know what the most of my background is. So I guess I would just say I'm not sure what I am.
Right. So there's not really a situation where I could ask you anything about your background where you would say you don't understand what I'm asking and then walk away.
I think I would understand the question no matter how it was being asked.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's a long history of Rachel Dolezal saying, yes, I am Black. She told KREM, actually, I don't like the term African American. I prefer Black. So if asked, I would say, yes, I consider myself to be Black. She has claimed to have a Black son that she adopted, but her birth parents say, no, that's our adopted son. That's Rachel's brother, not Rachel's son. And she has gone on to even frame her background not only as being Black, but as having been on the receiving end of discrimination or oppression based on her black race, her purported Black race. So let's break this down, okay? The controversy isn't that there's a white president of a local NAACP chapter, which is the nation's oldest civil rights organization. They don't discriminate. They very well could have hired her regardless of race, and they've actually issued a statement supporting her. At one point in America's history, though, a Black person passing themselves off as white could be arrested and thrown in jail. So there's a significant privilege that exists, Lewis, with a white person sort of as convenient for what they want to do, saying, I'm no longer white. I'm going to identify as a Black woman now. And she made some changes to her physical appearance based on older pictures that have been released of her. There's a significant amount of privilege inherent in saying, yeah, I consider myself to be Black when we think back to the history of racial identification in this country.
I mean, it's funny, many white people can go back through the books and find out that they are a certain percentage Black. And it goes, I think to some extent it goes both ways. But I mean, it's clear that she knew from the start that she was not Black at all. Is what's happening here?
Yeah, that's the issue, right? That's what seems to be the sort of fraud that has happened here. And I would completely sympathize if you said, listen, David, I want to talk to you about the fact that the Black activist community may not take a white person as seriously as an activist within the black community? That's a perfectly legitimate conversation to have, and it's one that warrants discussion. There's a long history of Jewish activists in the black civil rights movement, even Jews killed for being involved with the civil rights movement in the 1960s. She wants to advocate for the black community in the United States. Who can possibly criticize her for that, Lewis? That's all fine. But like over the weekend, like Ben Dixon told me, hosted the Benjamin Dixon show, I was Facebook messaging with him. He said, that's the key thing, David. It's only the fraudulent portion that matters and that makes it funny. Tim Wise is one of the most prolific speakers on race matters and is as white as her parents. But it's the lies that make it problematic. Like I've said on my show, Ben told me, I'd trade Raven Simone, who doesn't even want to be black, for Rachel Dolezal any day. You don't have to be gay to be a gay rights activist, Lewis. You don't have to be a soldier to be an anti-war activist. You don't have to be a woman to be a feminist or whatever. But you can't fraudulently claim to be a soldier in your anti-war advocacy or falsely claim to be a gay man to be a gay rights activist, right? That is really what is at issue for me here. And of course, the entire thing, as I mentioned, is just endlessly fascinating because of the long and specific history of the stories she's told. Not only have there been lies about her being black, she's built an entire false persona of oppression and history around her fake blackness.
Yeah, that's just our visceral reaction to be irked by these lies. Now, play the devil's advocate a little bit here. If she looks like she might be a black individual and she has lived her life as one and claiming to be one, she says she's been at the receiving end of perhaps some real actual black people have been through in terms of racism. So does that give her some insight that you and I might not have?
That is absolutely very valuable insight. But this is more akin to someone who puts on a fat suit on one of these shows where they place people in situations to live a day in someone else's shoes. That's all fine, well, and good, but it doesn't take away from the sort of longer term fraud that she's been enacting here. One other thing I want to mention, some people have said over the weekend, hey, listen, how is this different than Caitlyn Jenner, right? Bruce Jenner, born a man, said, I really identify as a woman. I'm transitioning to be a woman. I am now Caitlyn Jenner. What's the difference if Rachel Dolezal wants to be black and she lives her life as black? The difference here is that Dolezal falsely misrepresented her, or let me say, falsely represented or misrepresented her identity. Transgender individuals aren't lying about their gender identities. They're expressing their gender based on what they believe themselves to be. We don't have any evidence that Rachel Dolezal really thought she was black.
Yeah, I can't just decide that I think I'm black. I mean, either I have those genes or I don't, right?
No question about it. And as I said, skin color primarily determines racial privilege in this country. And while there is certainly anti-trans bias, that's a very separate issue. And I thought that over the weekend, a number of people came up with this, hey, there's no difference between Rachel Dolezal and Caitlyn Jenner. There could not be more differences, was my reaction. And it's just amazing that that even became a narrative. Let's talk about Bernie Sanders. There's a new survey from the Morning Consult, which finds that 44% of New Hampshire voters say they will vote for Hillary Clinton, while 32% of those voters say they would support Bernie Sanders of those who plan to vote in the Democratic primary. This is the closest race, the closest poll between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton that we are now seeing. Who else is in the poll? Joe Biden, 8% say they would vote for Vice President Joe Biden, who is not even a candidate right now. 2% say they would support former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. This is, as I mentioned, the closest margin for Bernie Sanders against Hillary Clinton so far. In Iowa, Hillary's at 54 and Bernie at 12. In South Carolina, Hillary's at 56 and Bernie at 10. And according to Real Clear Politics, Hillary Clinton still has a really big 48-point lead in national polling for the Democratic nomination. Let's remember, though, that this is the newest poll. So what's most likely, Lewis? The poll, I think, is probably a slight outlier, but at the same time, it's been quite a while since the other polling data, so numbers may well have shifted in Bernie Sanders' favor as well.
I hate talking about polls, but this is a New Hampshire poll. And, well, where is New Hampshire? It's right next to what state?
Vermont, no question about it. So you're getting at Vermont is Bernie Sanders' home turf. New Hampshire is right there. It's sort of logical that that's where he would be polling the best at this point in time.
It's possible. I can't say that with certitude, but that's what it seems like to me.
There's also been a big difference between the campaigns that Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders have been running respectively, right? Hillary Clinton's campaign has mostly been a name recognition campaign for now, whereas the Bernie Sanders campaign has been an issues and position campaign. So that could have an impact on the poll numbers. Let's also remember that whatever the poll numbers tell us about New Hampshire, South Carolina, or Iowa, Rick Santorum won Iowa in 2012. Newt Gingrich won South Carolina in 2012. They ultimately were total non-starters in the ultimate Republican nomination process.
That's true. And we do know that Americans agree with Bernie Sanders. So if he gets that message across, maybe we'll see this trend continue.
I want to talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders and Rand Paul. Rand Paul, of course, a libertarian running as a Republican in the Republican primary for 2016 president. Bernie Sanders, an independent running as a Democrat in the 2016 Democratic primary for president. I spoke to Dave Rubin recently, host of the Rubin Report, and he pitched to me this idea that Bernie versus Rand, as unlikely as it would be that Bernie Sanders would win the Democratic nomination and that Rand Paul would win the Republican nomination, as unlikely as that scenario would be, that it would be the most interesting one, because you've got the guy who's the outlier in the Democratic Party with regard not to the ideas of the voters, but to the ideas of the other candidates. And you have Rand Paul, who sort of stands out as a libertarian, purportedly small government libertarian, although we've picked that notion apart quite a bit over the last few months within the Republican Party, and that it would be really interesting if they both were to face off against each other. And I thought that may well be true. Let's look, though, at the absurdity of what Rand Paul has said on some issue relative to what Bernie Sanders has said. And I looked around online, and they both commented about single-payer healthcare and the idea that healthcare is a right. I've got two quotes, one from Bernie Sanders and one from Rand Paul. Bernie Sanders, sober, logical. Rand Paul, unhinged, conspiracy theory, alternate universe. And I'll read both of them to you now. Bernie Sanders. What does Bernie Sanders think about healthcare being a right? Quote, I believe that healthcare is a right regardless of income, that every American has the right to the best quality healthcare that the system can offer. Lewis, it's clear. It's concise, it's unequivocating, it's a position I agree with completely, that of Bernie Sanders on this issue.
And it's been his position all along. Yeah, we agree with it. It makes sense, and it's succinct. It's to the point. I like it.
Rand Paul on the idea of healthcare being a right. Quote, with regard to the idea of whether or not you have a right to healthcare, you have to realize what that implies. I'm a physician. That means you have a right to come to my house and conscript me. It means you believe in slavery. It means you're going to enslave not only me, but the janitor at my hospital, the assistants, the nurses. There's an implied threat of force. Do you have a right to beat down my door with the police, escort me away, and force me to take care of you? That's ultimately what the right to free healthcare would be. As usual, Rand Paul missing the entire point. People think Rand Paul is a smart Republican. Number one, physicians already practice under certain rules where they must provide healthcare to patients in a healthcare setting, such as a hospital. And it has nothing to do with single payer healthcare, since we don't have that. And it has nothing to do with beating down Rand Paul's door and demanding that he look at your eyes or whatever it was that he did when he gave himself an accreditation on a board he created and appointed his wife to be president of. Nurses can't just walk out in the middle of their shifts without transferring care of their patients, or else they risk losing their licenses. This already is part of the law. It has nothing to do with single payer.
I find it hard to believe that someone who can tie their shoes would believe what Rand Paul is saying here. It seems to me like it's just good old-fashioned fear-mongering, right?
Either Rand Paul is even more idiotic and foolish than what even we thought, or it is just absolute fear-mongering, because nothing about it being a right to have healthcare is about forcing Rand Paul or anybody else to provide care for free. It's about a system that doesn't depend on you pulling out your credit card after you've had a procedure done to pay, right? That's what we're talking about. It's not about doctors working for free in their homes. This is the absurdity of so-called libertarianism. Taxation is not theft. Civil rights laws that force businesses to serve black customers in the same way that they serve white customers are not slavery. The hysteria is out of control. And if we want to make a libertarian argument, are we really a free society if people can't even change jobs or choose not to work because of fears of losing their health insurance? There's sort of higher and lower level orders of freedom here. And Rand Paul and so many of these so-called libertarians are missing the forest for the trees, I think is the best analogy to use.
Yeah, it seems there's a pretty simple definition of freedom when you look it up, but it's incredible how different we can really think about that.
It's been completely perverted by so-called libertarians. People are going to beat Rand Paul's door down if there's a right to health care and force him to dilate someone's pupils and check for nerve damage. I mean, it's just patently absurd. If I'm wrong, tell me on Twitter, twitter.com/dpacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is funded by our audience. If you listen to the podcast or check out YouTube clips or listen to us on the radio or on television or Free Speech TV, please know that our primary source of funding is when viewers like you subscribe to David Pakman Show membership at davidpakman.com/membership. Today's new member of the day is Jennifer Valentino. Jennifer, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Jennifer gets access to the world-famous bonus show hosted by producer Lewis and so many other great member benefits. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up today. If you ever shop on Amazon.com, you can support our program with that shopping. If you first go to our website, davidpakman.com, and click on the Amazon banner at the right side of the page. Lewis, I think that summer semester is getting going for the college students in our audience. I started to see all sorts of insanely overpriced textbooks purchased through our Amazon link, including one called Patient Studies in Valvular, Congenital, and Rarer Forms of Cardiovascular Disease. That one, $127. And we've talked about this before. Not only are college students getting completely scammed by the exploding cost of higher education and by the big corporations with the student loans, but also by the book publishers, often making small changes to books every year or every other year. And then teachers update the syllabus to reflect the new edition, even though the changes are relatively minor. And then everybody's got to buy brand new $100, $150. I think we saw last semester even a $250 book.
It is incredible. Yes, I luckily did not have to buy many books when I was going through the education system, but none of them were what I would call inexpensive.
I'm very sorry for whoever had to buy that book, but I am at least glad that you chose to redirect a few percent of that purchase to the David Pakman Show by using the link to Amazon at davidpakman.com. We're in the middle of a fundraising campaign. We're trying to raise $50,000 in 50 days. I have huge news, which is that over the weekend, we crested the $20,000 mark. We are now at $20,259 raised by 257 donors in 15 days. So the big thing now, Lewis, is 25,000, which is halfway. We are $4,741 from halfway. We really need to get there, and then we will be on the home stretch. There's a lot written about that when you hit the halfway point in these types of campaigns, people's confidence that you could actually succeed and raise the full amount goes way up. And then the donations tend to accelerate. So for now, Lewis, the new goal, now that we've hit 20,000, is to get to 25 as quickly as possible. If someone wants to go to davidpakman.com/donate, which links to the campaign, and throw in 4741, I certainly would have no complaints, Lewis.
No objections here. Halfway has a nice ring to it, and if we could do it in less than half the allotted time, I think that would be great.
Absolutely. So go to davidpakman.com/donate. Check out the perks that are available. Check out some of the funny names that people have made donations under, including Kim Jong-un, including Vladimir Putin also is a new one, Lewis. We got a $1 donation from Vladimir Putin. And remember that any donation at all qualifies you to get a David Pakman Show membership at half price for the year. Just a little added incentive there, davidpakman.com/donate. We've talked about Steven Anderson before. He's this infamous pastor from the Faithful World Baptist Church in Phoenix, Arizona. He prayed, or said that we should pray, that Caitlyn Jenner will die and go to hell. And if you don't like it, you're not welcome at his church. This is the same guy who has said in the past that God punishes gay people with the death penalty. He went on a crazy fag-laden rant about Barack Obama about 3 years ago. And he posted a couple sermons in December, one saying that we need an AIDS-free world by Christmas and that it could be done by killing all gay people. And another one saying that, quote, dirty faggots want to snatch and rape your kids. Here he is, intimating and elucidating his ideas about Caitlyn Jenner. Take a look.
You know, this week, this filthy sodomite picture is everywhere, and people are showing this transvestite or transgender or whatever this guy is. You know what I'm talking about? This athlete or whoever he is. I don't know who it is. I'd never even heard of him before this week. Bruce Jenner has basically mutilated his body, apparently. And you know what? He's being praised by our president. Our President Obama is praising him or praising her. We don't even know what it is. I think that he used the female pronoun about somebody named Bruce and said, you know, oh, such courage. You're so wonderful. Oh, you know, our president is praising the wicked here. Okay. And there's just all the, and I mean, this filthy pervert is just like on all these magazine covers and just everywhere, just being crammed down our throat to literally like hundreds of millions of people, literally hundreds of millions of people are being subjected to looking at a trans freak. And this person is just the evangelist of sodomy and filth to the world. And you know what? And people are, and then people are like, oh, we need to pray for him that he finds Jesus. I'm going to pray that he dies and goes to hell. Are you serious?
Lewis, what's more dangerous to children? Knowing about Caitlyn Jenner or being exposed to self-professed and arbitrary bigoted ideas like those of Steven Anderson?
That's a great question. I guess it depends on who you ask. I think you know what my answer would be.
This guy runs a non-profit church. He has a special exemption from paying taxes because his bigotry, which is Caitlyn Jenner should die soon, all gay people should die, talks about Obama with fag thrown around. The government gives him a special privilege of not paying taxes because it's all under the umbrella of being religious, Lewis. The problem needs to be solved now.
The problem does need to be solved. And I think the only logical answer to the problem is no tax-exempt status for any religious organization because it's too hard to pick and choose.
I think you're absolutely right. Educational institutions that meet all of those requirements can stay as nonprofit institutions. And that's what you'll hear from the religious right a lot, which is, well, a lot of these religious institutions are also doing education. Okay, let's have standalone requirements that are just education-based for tax-exempt status, and let's make it regardless of religious affiliation, because you've got guys like this, and this is not the only guy, Lewis. We've interviewed probably close to 10 individuals who have tax exemptions for their bigotry from the government, and it needs to end now. And by the way, what's Christian about praying for people to die and go to hell? I didn't know that was part of the Christian doctrine.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the church. And let's continue to spread the word about freaks like this guy.
All right, next, can creativity be taught? We'll talk about that with Professor Tina Seelig.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to The David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Tina Seelig, who's professor of the practice at Stanford School of Engineering, where she teaches courses on creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. It's so great to have you on. You know, we talk a lot about issues that lead us to discussions of nature versus nurture. And invariably, one of the things that comes up is this idea of creativity. Are people sort of born creative, or can creativity be taught? So let me first just get you to react to that. I mean, generally speaking, what's the balance on nature versus nurture with creativity?
A really good question. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join you, especially around this very exciting topic. I get asked this all the time. Can you teach creativity, nature, nurture? You can compare it to any other skill. Think about math or science or sports or music. Some people, of course, have natural tendencies. They're born with great athletic skill and musical ability, but we can all get better. This is what's really important. I don't quite understand exactly why it is that people are so averse to the idea that you can't teach creativity. They think that this is something that it's basically an excuse for them in many ways, saying, oh, I'm not creative, just like they say I'm not musical. But you know what? We all can get better with practice.
Well, in thinking about why might it not be able to be taught, this may be a sort of crude analogy, but if we think about artificial intelligence, and I recently saw this new movie Ex Machina, where someone is brought in to sort of test whether an AI would pass the Turing test, where it's indistinguishable from speaking to a person. And we can imagine sort of how someone might be able to program an AI to act as if it has human emotions. And that wouldn't necessarily mean that it has those emotions. So along the same lines, I could imagine, okay, I want to train someone to learn to sort of think outside the box creatively for solutions. And I could give them a sort of set of steps by which they could do that. But would that mean that they are truly thinking creatively and outside the box, or that they're mimicking a sort of process that someone has taught them?
No, you really can increase creativity, just like you can increase people's musical ability or athletic abilities, and certainly the ways you can teach math and science. There is a set of skills, and just like anything else, these skills can be learned and they can be mastered. I've been doing this for 15 years at Stanford, and I can tell you that people literally get transformed. It's a combination of knowledge, attitudes, and actually actions. So part of it is understanding that problems can be solved and looking at problems as opportunities. So with that framework, you start basically taking the challenges around you and saying, how might I come up with a solution? One of the things I spend a lot of time doing is teaching the students how to frame the problems that they are faced with and how to challenge those frames to come up with really a very different set of solutions. Should I give you an example?
Please.
Okay, a really simple example. Let's imagine that we have a friend whose birthday is coming up. We could brainstorm about the best birthday party that we could put together. But if we change the question just a little bit and say, how can we plan the best birthday celebration? All of a sudden, it completely opens up the frame of possibilities, right? We went from a party to a celebration. Now, for many people, that's a huge aha, that the answer to the question was actually baked into the answer was actually baked into the question. When we said, let's plan a birthday party, the assumption was that it was a party. So by questioning that and asking a different question, you come up with a very different set of solutions.
If someone comes into you, though, and they say, listen, Tina, I'm working on these problems. I got hired by a startup, and I need to think creatively about how we might gain new customers. And I really just know what I learned in business school, right? I know about defining the market, and I know about defining the product in a way that it answers a question or solves a problem. And I know about email marketing, but anybody could just look this stuff up on the internet. I'm not really thinking creatively. How could you get someone to sort of break out of that paradigm in a way that would really change their level of creativity?
Wonderful. So we're very influenced by the type of experiences we have. Just as you said, oh, gee, this is what I learned in business school. So the key is to get out of that comfort zone. The more data we have, the more experiences we have, the more we bring to the table. So by going out and exploring the world and getting different inputs, you can then use different examples as a stimulus for new ideas. Some of the best ideas come, and we all know this, from connecting and combining things in really interesting ways. But you need to have starting materials. Think about going into your kitchen. You're not going to come up with very innovative recipes if all you have is a very limited set of ingredients that you use again and again and again. However, as soon as you keep adding some new ingredients to the mix, it dramatically increases the number of options you have. So the key is to bring in more ingredients into your life so that you have those as starting points for new ideas. Now that might sound very abstract, but it happens every single day. Think about the types of books you read, the type of movies you go to. You just referred to, a movie you went to and how that inspired your thinking. Well, you could go to very different types of movies. You can read different books, go to different lectures, travel to different places. And this will all provide a starting ground for connecting, combining new ideas.
So let me go a little bit from creativity towards entrepreneurship. And there was something super interesting that you wrote in an answer. You did a Reddit AMA recently, and someone asked about the idea of luck. And you said you don't really believe in luck, that you believe in, well, I don't know what you believe in, but you said you don't believe in luck. And one of the things I often think about with regard to entrepreneurship is, yeah, luck is this sort of abstract, amorphous, woo-like thing, but there is something to be said for timing. And there can be something that would be apparent, that's something that would seem like luck with regard to the timing of one's ideas and creativity and entrepreneurship. Isn't that a sort of luck?
So luck is a really interesting variable in our lives, right? There's certain things that are just really great luck, great timing, or really bad luck that strikes us all. But we have a lot more control over our luck than a lot of people think. We can make our own luck. There's actually been research that has been done on this, where people who are more outgoing, more engaged, who are more positive, end up finding opportunities. I always say that there's $1 million, and that is meant metaphorically, $1 million waiting for you in every room. It's up to you to find it, right? When you walk into a classroom at Stanford, you can sit and listen to the lecture. You can do that, but you can also meet all the people around you. And guess what? It's likely you're going to end up learning something new. You might even meet the co-founder of your new venture. So you need to be engaged with the world in a way that allows you to ramp up the possibility and the probability that you're going to be lucky.
Does luck not work as well for introverts then, based on this?
Well, it's a really good question. I think you can use very different levers as an introvert. It doesn't mean introverts don't talk to people, right? It means being engaged and observant and seeing opportunities in your midst and often solutions that are right there. There's a study that was done, and I talk about it in one of my books, where a group of people were given newspapers to read, and they were told to count the number of images in the paper. Well, the people who self-identified as being unlucky, these are people who self-identified, took several minutes looking through the paper, and they all got the answer wrong. The people who were self-identified as being really lucky people, it took them only a few seconds, and they all got the answer right. Now, what happened? It turned out that there was a note in the newspaper just inside the front page, the back of the front page, and it said, "Stop counting now. There are 35 pictures in this newspaper." Well, the lucky people saw it. The unlucky people didn't see it. And the reason the unlucky people didn't see it is they weren't looking at the words. They were just looking at the pictures because that's what they had been told to do. Whereas the lucky people had a much broader frame they were using, and they actually read the note. So it's quite interesting. It's really about the way we engage with the world.
That is very, very interesting. That study is fascinating. I would be interested to take a look at that one in more detail. Let me tell everybody we've been speaking to Tina Seelig, who's professor of the practice at Stanford School of Engineering. She teaches courses on creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Huge headlines this morning that a North Korean soldier walked across the DMZ and defected to South Korea. And I think a lot of people did not read the full articles. They thought that it was actually someone who had walked across that joint authority area that is the subject of so many documentaries where you have North and South Korean soldiers sort of facing off. That was not the case. I'll tell you the actual story. This was a teenage North Korean soldier, completely normal to have teenage North Korean soldiers in North Korea, as we know, walked across what is the most heavily militarized border earlier today, defecting to South Korea. There are more than 1,000 defections from North Korea to South Korea every year, but most of the defectors go through China because it's considered safer and less risky. So it's pretty rare that a North Korean just crosses that heavily mined, demilitarized zone. The last crossing was about 3 years ago in 2012. The soldier reportedly approached a remote South Korean guard post in Gangwon Province's Hwaseon County in the central area of the peninsula at about 8 a.m. local time this morning. This was not someone walking across the Joint Security Area, also known as the JSA. A ton of people tweeting and writing and posting as if it was this incredible situation where a North Korean soldier standing just over the line at the Joint Security Area just sort of ran over into the arms of South Korean soldiers. Not at all the way it happened, Lewis, but still, every time this happens, it is interesting, particularly when we know that North Korea has placed all sorts of mines along that area, not to keep people out, but to keep their own soldiers in, which tells you a lot about what's happening there.
Yeah, it's incredible. I wonder what is going to happen to this guy's family. If he has any family, they're certainly going to be in a lot of trouble now. You know, I think a military coup here, you know, if people could just summon their courage and find ways to make it happen, I mean, all their problems would be solved.
You mean if the North Koreans were able to do that?
Yeah, I think it would require a military coup. I don't think you could have a revolution here, considering the size of the military.
Right.
But it could happen, right?
Yeah, that, I mean, I'm being optimistic. Of course, conceptually it could happen. Practically speaking, in North Korea, could it happen? I don't really know. And, you know, we hear about how the U.S. is very interested in solving humanitarian crises. There always just happens to be some natural resource or the stability of some commodity in the market at stake. Here we have a situation where it is a humanitarian crisis. Arguably, it maybe is also some kind of national security crisis, but it doesn't really seem that clear that it is. And the U.S. seems to have no interest in going in. And again, I'm not advocating that the U.S. go in. I'm just saying that it really exposes the double standard around the U.S. and humanitarian concerns around the world. And there's many other examples in Africa as well.
Yeah, it's tough. What do you do? It seems our only course of action is sanctions. And, well, you know, those end up hurting the civilians as well. And so how do you solve this problem? Maybe you don't.
We have an interesting clip to play for you. This is from Fox News. This is anti-gay Fox pundit Cal Thomas, who played the old slippery slope, blah, 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 blah argument that we've heard many times. Hey, if all of a sudden gay people get married, you're going to have polygamy, you're going to have 40-year-olds marrying 6-year-old girls. It's just going to be a nightmare. This is Shannon Bream and Cal Thomas from Fox News. Let's set it up here so that then we can break it all down.
I think a lot of evangelical leaders are looking at this as inevitable, that the Supreme Court will in fact strike down laws restricting marriage between men and women. But I think what the court has to do then, if it's going to do this, is say, okay, where is the line then? If equal protection covers gays, lesbians, transgenders, and the rest, what about the polygamists? Some of their groups have already said that after same-sex marriage is approved, they want polygamy approved. And even further out, the adult child marriage people. men, especially, who want to marry young boys or young girls, as occurs in some Muslim countries, by the way. They want their rights too. So who's going to say no, and based on what?
Well, and that came up during the Supreme Court arguments about this, not the extent of the adult-child relationships, but conversations about polygamy and those kinds of things. And people will say, it's a crazy, slippery slope. Yeah. You're just trying to scare people, but that's never going to happen.
Well, where's the standard? I mean, if it's not the Constitution, if it's not Scripture, where is the standard? You walk into the supermarket, there are pounds, there are quarts, there are standards by which you measure produce and how much you're going to pay when you go out based on how many tomatoes you have and how much they weigh. What if we did away with those standards? It would be totally chaotic.
Okay. I mean, Lewis, it's so hard to even encapsulate why this argument continues to come up again and again and why it's so ridiculous. First of all, both polygamy and child marriage were accepted practices in the Bible. Some accounts even say that Jesus' mother, Mary, was as young as 12 when she married Joseph, who was said to be in his 30s or 40s. But even with that aside, there's plenty of polygamy and concubines and the whole thing in the Bible. This is yet another one of these so-called Christian family values conservatives who can't seem to tell the difference between two consenting adults in a relationship and child abuse on the other hand. They say, like Huckabee says, we're going to have a problem with trans students in a different bathroom because as a kid, I would have lied about my gender identity just to spy on girls. Well, the problem seems to be with the people like Huckabee because we've had no incidents like the ones he describes. Cal Thomas here, who claims to be on the side of Christian family values, he's the one who's saying if there's gay marriage, all of a sudden you're going to have child marriages and polygamy. But he can't seem to tell the difference between consenting relationships between two adults and child abuse.
And there's still a system of laws, right? How would those laws change when you create a new one or change an old one? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I think a lot of it is just trying to scare people. I'm not convinced that all the people who try to bring up the polygamy stuff actually believe that it would happen.
This argument is as stupid as saying if we let gays have driver's licenses, then straight people wouldn't be able to drive, right? Or let's think back. Women getting the right to vote is super dangerous, Lewis, because we're expanding the definition of who can vote. Next, it's going to be kids and animals and rulers voting. Desktop rulers and calculators are going to be able to vote, Lewis. It's just going to open the floodgates. Oh, right. Yeah, wait, that didn't happen. Yeah. I guess that doesn't really matter, though.
Probably not. No. There's an agenda here. You just got to focus on what's important.
And remember, Abraham and Jacob and David and Solomon and Gibeon and just everybody, Nahor and Eliphaz. I mean, it's concubines and multiple wives, and even sometimes where we have rapist plus victim marriage, like in Deuteronomy 22. But it's if we get away from the Bible that we're going to have all of this stuff. Get the hell out of here. I mean, these guys like Cal Thomas are just, you can just see that he's desperately trying to hold on to some semblance of relevance here as his ideas become as antiquated as, racial separatism and women not voting, quite frankly. That's the level to which these guys are retrograde in their ideas. We have a voicemail number. It's 219-2-DAVID-P. The Kansas troll was really upset about what we said with regard to that audience question on Friday, Lewis. Would we date a transgender woman? Here's Kansas troll.
Hey, David, I just watched your audience question. Should I feel guilty? Would I consider a transgender individual? And you know what is absolutely amazing is the PC game that you displayed. You tap danced and tiptoed around the entire issue just enough so that you can stay inside the transgender ally group. Why can't you just admit it? Of course, yeah, most men would be attracted to a trans woman if they actually appear to be a woman and were attractive and pass for a legit woman. But let's just keep in mind, that's like 0.001% of transgenders. But why can't you, instead of tiptoeing around the issue, just, admit that when reality comes into play, they do not have a biological vagina, they're a real vagina, so therefore you can have zero sexual attraction to them as a woman once you find out that their parts are completely fake or still belong to the other gender.
Yeah, Lewis, I think I was pretty clear, right? I said, I don't have any ideological problem right? With the idea of a transgender woman and relationships with a transgender woman. And I was pretty clear, I'm attracted to feminine women who biologically are female. I don't think I was dancing around it in any way, and I don't think you were either.
No, I don't know, but like we're going to be able to convince the Kansas troll of that. He's a hater. But, I say again to the Kansas troll, thanks for watching.
Yes, I really appreciate. I mean, he is one of our most devoted fans, and for that, I cannot thank him enough. On today's bonus show, we will talk about Zimbabwe's currency completely dying. We'll talk about quadrillions. Well, the term quadrillion is going to be mentioned in this segment. Let's start there. Taco Bell. The Taco Bell saga continues. There are now going to be upscale Taco Bells in major cities, and there will also be drone usage going to the next level in China. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Get the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership. What is more compelling, Lewis, than upscale Taco Bells? You'll tell us more about it on the bonus show. Speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.